I found my daughter shivering in a laundry room on Thanksgiving Eve. Her hands were blue, her cardigan thin, and her phone, battery gone, sat in a plastic bag labeled Ellie, hold for review. Down the hall, her husband's family laughed by the fireplace. They called it boundaries. I call it cruelty. My name is Martha Cole, 67 years old. I spent 40 years behind a school cafeteria counter turning government cheese into smiles. I know what real warmth feels like, and it isn't 55 degrees on a locked thermostat. That night I learned love can sound like structure when it's really control. They said she needed to cool off. They said it was therapy. They taped house rules under the table. No calls to mom, no coat until chores are done, heat only when company comes. So I did what mothers do when the world forgets how to be kind. I wrapped her in my coat, walked straight past their smiles, and opened the door myself. We didn't know then that one night of cold would turn into a fight for her freedom in diners, in hospitals, and finally in courtrooms, where the truth about what happened inside that perfect house would finally meet the light. Because sometimes warmth isn't a thermostat setting, it's a choice. And that night, we chose to be warm. Maple Brook looked like a catalog. White icicle lights were already clipped straight as rulers along roof lines, even though it wasn't even December. SUVs lined both sides of Birch Lane, and the clubhouse windows glowed the soft yellow of new lamps. Inside, I could see a folding table draped in a plaid runner, crock pots breathing steam, the Lions game on mute. Folks I didn't know laughed like they were being paid to do it. A little boy I recognized from the community pool peeked out the front door and spotted me. "Miss Martha," he yelled like I was Santa. "Miss Ellie is in timeout again." "In the laundry room." He said it the way kids announce when the dog had an accident. Matter of fact. My chest stung. Timeout was something we did in kindergarten, not something you did to a grown woman. I told my legs to move and they obeyed before I could start being polite about it. The clubhouse smelt like nutmeg and new carpet. There was that shine of newly purchased on everything. Matching chairs, a welcome sign with perfect handwriting. Luke was by the sodas, sleeves rolled, pouring 3 types of Diet Cola like he was hosting the governor. He saw me and went stiff for a heartbeat. Then he plastered on a smile that only included his teeth. "Martha," he said, voice light, "you weren't on the list." I didn't ask about a list, and I kept walking. Barbara, his mother, stood by the green bean casserole. She was the kind of woman who could say, "Bless your heart," and mean the opposite. Pearls, sweater set, a smudge of lipstick that never found her teeth. She floated toward me with a glass of Merlot cradled like a baby. "Martha," she sang, "what a surprise. You should have texted. We would have. I did prepare, and I held up my pie. "Where's Ellie?" Luke looked toward the hallway like it might answer for him. She needed a minute to cool off. It's been, a long day. I've spent decades translating cafeteria code. Cool off is what we tell 4th graders when they shove in line. It's what we say to distract from the push and make it sound like the weather's at fault. My nose twitched with that old hot flare of a mother who knows she's being managed. The hallway air was wrong, cold enough to sting. It got colder the deeper we went, and I stopped at the sight of a thermostat behind a clear plastic lockbox set to 55. I've seen those in schools to keep teachers from cranking the heat, but I've never seen one in a home. A tiny brass keyhole blinked up at me, and I had the petty thought that if I had my old cafeteria key ring, the one that could open half the district, I'd have had that box off in a second. I pushed open the door, met resistance, and leaned my shoulder into it. "Ellie?" "Mom?" Dry as leaves, small as a secret. The laundry room light flickered. Ellie sat on top of the dryer in a thin cardigan, hair damp against her neck, hands tucked under her thighs for warmth. On the shelf was her phone, no battery, beside it a Ziploc bag labeled with blue painter's tape and a black marker, "Ellie, hold for review." Inside were her keys, her debit card, her driver's license. My heart did that odd skip it did the day she was born and didn't cry at first, a stop that makes your whole body tilt. I shrugged off my coat and wrapped her. "We're leaving."
"Mom," she whispered, "they said I got too emotional about the budget. I asked to see the statement and you can tell me the rest in the car." When we stepped into the hall, Barbara and Luke were there, their faces arranged to look casual. Barbara rested one hand on her wine and one on the doorframe like she was holding the house up.
"Martha," she said, the sugar sliding off her voice, "we're working on boundaries." I held up the Ziploc. What boundary is confiscating keys and a phone battery? Luke lifted his chin. "This is our home," he said, arguing with air more than me. "We're trying structure. Dr. Keller recommended. Dr. Pepper might have recommended it, and I'd still call it what it is." Somewhere in the dining area, someone cheered a touchdown, and no one clapped in the hall. I glanced past Barbara and my eyes caught blue tape again. Something was stuck to the underside of the table, dead center. I ducked under and peeled it off, a printed sheet titled "House Rules" in bold. "No calls to Mom without Luke present. Phone to stay on kitchen counter 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. Debit card Barbara only. Appointments cleared through Luke. No coat inside until chores complete. Thermostat stays at 55 unless company is present." I stood up slowly. My hands had stopped shaking, which is always a bad sign in me. It means the part that makes nice has gone quiet. "Ellie," I said evenly, "shoes." Luke took a step like he might block the door. I shifted, years of hauling milk crates, finding their groove in my hips, and put myself in front of my girl. We walked. At the door, Barbara called after us, voice bright like she was giving a raffle prize. "If she goes, the budget stops. Rent, car insurance, all of it. We can't support poor choices." I turned. "Then I guess she doesn't owe you the budget anymore." Cold smacked us honest as soon as we hit the parking lot. My Corolla's heater squealed but behaved, and I cranked it as far as it would go. I set the pie in the back seat and Ellie's hands around the vents. We drove to Dottie's Diner because no matter how messy your life looks, a chrome counter, a waitress who calls you hun, and chicken noodle soup can pin the world down long enough to think. Dottie herself was on the register. She slid us 2 menus like she was dealing cards she already knew the order of. "Bad day?" she asked. "Working on making it better," I said. Ellie's hand shook around the mug. "They said they're helping," she whispered. "They said I get anxious with numbers, and they don't want me to spiral." Barbara put my name on a store credit card I didn't open. She said it's easier for points. When I asked to see the statement, she told Luke to lock the thermostat because consequences help. "And Dr. Keller isn't a therapist," she added like she was confessing. "He teaches PE." My phone buzzed. Pam Garrison, who has been my friend since we put hairnets on together in '96 and who's now a night shift nurse, texted back faster than any teenager. "I'm on break. Want me to swing by?" She walked in 10 minutes later, scrub top, hair up, eyes that see everything. She listened without interrupting. Then she slid a napkin toward us with a number scribbled on it. "Hotline," she said. "Free, confidential. They'll help you name stuff so you don't have to carry it without a label." We called with the diner hum in the background, forks on tights, music tinny, life insisting. The woman on the line had one of those voices made of soft rocks. She asked kind questions. She said the words coercive control and financial abuse like a diagnosis, and then said, "You are not crazy." She suggested we go to Mercy Hospital to document the cold exposure and file for an emergency order of protection at the county courthouse in the morning. The way she set the steps made them sound like walking a hallway instead of climbing Everest. Pam wrote everything down in her tidy block letters, the way she did back when we had to count milk cartons so no kid got shorted. Pam followed us to the hospital with her hazards on like a guardian angel with good tires.
The triage nurse took Ellie's temperature and noted the redness at her knuckles, the tremor in her hands. A resident came by with a clipboard and gentle eyes and said, "You're safe now. We can print this for the court if you need it." There was a social worker who gave us a folder full of numbers and a cheap phone in case someone decided to collect ours again. We slept at my place, on the pullout that squeaks like it's telling secrets. Ellie crying quietly and me at the kitchen table, sorting bank receipts I'd saved from birthdays and blowouts, trying to do the math of respect. It never adds up when control is the variable. Morning smelt like burnt toast and resolve. We walked into the Winnebago County Courthouse past a wreath on the metal detector. The clerk had peppermint earrings and slid forms and a pen across the counter like she was handing me courage. She said, "Take your time. You're doing fine." Ellie's hand stilled with that pen. She told it like it happened, the lockbox on the thermostat, the Ziploc bag, the list under the table, the keys. She wrote the words, "I don't feel safe at home," and then she underlined safe like she was underlying a spell. Luke showed up for the hearing, ironed within an inch of his life, with Barbara and a man in a navy blazer who introduced himself as counsel and called me ma'am in a way that tasted sour. He said words like misunderstanding and family dynamics. Barbara dabbed dry eyes with the tissue she didn't need. Luke kept his hands in fists even when they were pretending to be open.
The judge was a woman with the posture of someone who hauls other people's bricks all day. She asked Ellie to tell her what happened in her own words. I held up the paper I'd pulled from under the table, and the room felt like it leaned toward it, like the truth has its own gravity. I told the judge about the lockbox, the keys, the battery, the budget threats, Dr. Keller's gym whistle, and said, "Your Honor, I fed 1,000 kids on USDA guidelines. This isn't structure. This is starvation of dignity." A door opened in the back, and Officer Daniel Nguyen stepped in, hat in his hand. He lives down the block and replaced my porch bulb without being asked last spring. "Your Honor," he said, voice steady, "I responded to a noise complaint at that address last month. I observed a thermostat in a lockbox then. Miss Trent told me she wasn't allowed to touch it. Miss Barbara Trent said discipline builds character. I documented it." He held up a report. The way his hand didn't shake calmed something in me. Then Mr. Patel from next door, retired engineer, neat mustache, the kind of man who keeps his rake like a friend, lifted his hand from the back row. "If the court allows," he said softly, "we put in a ring camera after our garage got broken into. It catches our driveway and part of theirs. I saw Miss Trent outside in a light sweater on a very cold night, and I did not do anything. I have the timestamp." He looked straight at Ellie. "I am sorry." Luke's lawyer objected to everything with a heartbeat. The judge sustained some and overruled others, and then took off her glasses and spoke plain. "I can't fix a marriage," she said, "but I can set a boundary." She granted an emergency order of protection. Luke was to stay away from our address, return Ellie's keys, phone, and documents immediately. Access to funds to be restored pending a separate hearing. No third-party supervision by relatives. She looked at Barbara and added, "That includes you." In the hall, Barbara leaned in close enough that I could smell the wine like a punctuation mark. "She'll be back," she said. "She can't manage without us." I smiled, small and sharp, because sometimes you don't need teeth. "Watch us," I said. We moved Ellie into my 2-bedroom over Kara's yarn shop on 7th Street. The first night, we set our little digital thermostat to 70 and toasted it with boxed mac and cheese in chipped bowls. Pam brought a thrift store lamp and a stack of library paperbacks.
Officer Nguyen stopped by on patrol and checked the window locks without turning it into a speech. Mr. Patel delivered samosas and a folded apology note I didn't need, but tucked in my Bible anyway. It would be neat if healing was a staircase. It isn't. It's a sidewalk in March. Ice, slush, dry, repeat. Ellie kept catching herself asking permission for things that were hers by default. "Can I sit on the couch?" she'd say, hand hovering, and then she'd flinch when she heard herself. She would pick up her phone and put it back down like it was hot because her brain remembered it didn't belong to her. And there were losses without receipts. Favorite mug left behind, sweater that now belonged to the wrong story. We went to Mercy twice a week for a while, not because her body needed it, but because the social worker there knew how to talk to someone who'd been measured for months. Ellie started seeing a counselor whose office smelled like eucalyptus and had a lopsided plant that refused to die. She got a part-time job at the public library shelving books, and the first time she slid a hardcover into place with that tiny thunk of rightness, I watched her shoulders drop into a posture I recognized from when she was 9 and reading under the blanket with a flashlight. I joined a chair yoga class at the senior center and learned that breathing can be a practice when you've forgotten how in a house that watched your lungs like a meter. On the 4th day in the apartment, a thick envelope slid under our door, quiet as a mouse, but heavy. Inside was a handwritten note. "Don't mess with the Trents. You'll end up as miserable as your daughter. Give up now." There was no signature. I sat at the kitchen table with that letter and felt my blood go a temperature that didn't match the thermostat. Ellie came out of the shower with a towel on her head and froze when she saw me holding it. "We don't need to keep that," she said, voice small. "We need to show it," I answered, voice steady. We walked it straight to the police station and Officer Nguyen copy photoed it, bagged it like a treasure, and said, "Thank you for not pretending it's nothing." Then he told us what to do if anything else arised. Take a picture, don't engage, call. He didn't make promises he couldn't keep, which I appreciated more than I can say. Luke texted Ellie twice after the order, once a paragraph that started as an apology and ended as a threat, and once a picture of a bank statement labeled budget with her name removed from the access to the account. We printed both for the file. Barbara posted something on Facebook, vague enough to be about the weather, but pointed enough that a handful of church friends messaged me to ask if Ellie was okay. I told the truth without decoration. She's safe, and we're getting help. That sentence can be both a shield and a bridge. The second court day about funds was meaner. Money always makes things meaner. Their lawyer brought printouts of Ellie's online shopping history. 3 sweaters, a pair of boots from 2 winters ago, a diffuser she bought when her headaches wouldn't quit. He said the words impulsive and irresponsible and asked questions that sounded like facts from far away. My friend James Alvarez, a legal aid lawyer who once helped me when a delivery vendor tried to build a school twice for milk, stood with us and taught me the power of phrases like pattern and context. He submitted the hospital notes, the officer's report, the list from under the table. He asked Ellie to describe, not perform, what happened when she asked to see a statement. She told them about the phrase, "You get anxious with numbers," delivered like a glass of water with a drop of bleach. The judge listened, brows knit, and when she ruled, she didn't make us heroes, them villains. She made a plan. Temporary access restored, separate bank accounts established, forbidden third-party oversight, review in 90 days. It wasn't satisfying like a movie. It was something better, enforceable. Outside the courthouse, Luke walked too close and leaned down like he might whisper something tender. "You'll come running back when she bankrupts you," he said. "People like you can't afford principles." I laid my hand flat on my chest to keep the words from sinking. "We're not bankrupt," I said quietly.
We're paying in full and in cash for peace. On Sundays, I started bringing Ellie to the senior center's pancake breakfast because sometimes church felt like a risk, and pancakes were the kind of sacrament that doesn't ask creed questions. We sat with widowers who told the same jokes every week and ladies who still wore brooches. We soon had a new kind of family, the kind that shows up with a covered dish and no commentary, the kind that believes your version without cross-examining it. 2 blocks down from the apartment, the library decorated for December with paper snowflakes the staff cut at the circulation desk when the line died down. Ellie now wore a name tag and a little lanyard with keys that belonged to her, and every time she unlocked the back door, a tiny joy clicked in my ribcage. Her manager, Jana, was a woman in her 40s with sharp bangs and soft eyes. And on slow afternoons, she taught Ellie how to mend spines with glue that smelled like kindergarten. Ellie would come home with a streak of paste on her sleeve and tell me about an old man who'd asked him where the westerns were because his wife said he had to start reading instead of just talking about it. The week before Christmas, my hands were deep in bread dough when the doorbell rang. Barbara stood on the landing in a coat the color of money, hair sprayed so tight it might withstand a tornado. She held a bakery box like a compromise. "I brought cookies," she said. I propped the door with my foot and looked at the box. Frosted wreaths looked back. "Cookies aren't keys," I said. She pushed past the nicety and into the hallway. "I want to talk to Ellie." "She'll talk when she wants. You can leave a message like the rest of us." "You've poisoned her," Barbara snapped. "She's weak and you reward it. Love is tough." "Love is warm," I answered. "At least 70 degrees. She blinked at that, like the sentence hit a shelf she wasn't expecting. Then she leaned in, the smell of something expensive swamping the doorway, and said very softly, "You will be alone when she fails." I thought about that while I washed my hands and kneaded the dough and wiped flour with the hem of my apron. I've been alone before. You can be alone in a crowd when the crowd is busy approving of your moderator voice. But I am not alone now. I have Pam who answers at 2 a.m., the clerk with peppermint earrings, Officer Nguyen who fixes porch bulbs and reports, Mr. Patel who brought samosas in his apology, Dottie who keeps coffee hot like a promise, Jana who labels glue, and above all, myself. I did not stop being my own company when my child got married. I did not require their permission to keep being mother. On Christmas morning, we ate pie for breakfast. Ellie placed her keys on the table like a centerpiece. Her hair was up in a messy bun, and she wore the fuzzy socks I stuff in her stocking every year because some traditions have to outlast the seasons that tried to kill them. Snow brushed the windows. The church down the block rang a carol soft and off-key. She looked at the thermostat and laughed, a clean laugh that didn't check anyone's face first. "Mom," she said, "I forgot I could set my own heat." I lifted my mug. May it always be warm enough to think clear. The day after New Year's, we took the pie carrier back to my friend Dolores because I'd borrowed it for a bake sale 2 summers ago and then kept forgetting. Dolores never mentioned the months. She just hugged Ellie like a normal person and made a joke about how certain containers are boomerangs. I cried in the car afterwards, not because of anything dramatic, but because returning small things is one of the ways you announce you live somewhere on purpose. February thawed the edges of everything and slushed the rest. Luke filed for a mediation that felt like a party where everyone forgets why they came. We accepted. It wasn't peace, but it wasn't war, and I'll take boring middle ground over dramatic trenches any day. The mediator spoke in practical nouns: file, allocate, copy, return. Ellie didn't shrink during any of it. She wore her library lanyard and wrote down exactly what she agreed to and exactly what she didn't. Halfway through, she stood to stretch, and the sound of her spine popping felt like a bell. On a Tuesday in March, I was on the senior center's balance board,
Imagine a stubborn dinner plate that wants you on the floor. When my phone buzzed, Ellie had texted a picture of a small paper sign on the library corkboard. Adult story time for people who missed bedtime stories more than they missed sleep. I sat right there on the yoga mat and cried so hard, my teacher fetched a box of Kleenex and sat with me without asking a single question. There's a particular ache when your child comes back to themselves and holds up a piece and says, "Is this mine?" And you get to say, "Always was." In April, we planted basil and a hardy tomato plant in pots on the fire escape because life can be tender and practical at the same time. We ate the first tomato with salt and watched the sun drop behind the Lutheran steeple, and I told Ellie the time she threw a tantrum in the cereal aisle because I wouldn't let her have marshmallows shaped like rainbows. She wheezed laughing and said I was probably right, and I said I was definitely tired.
Spring ripped the coats off the city and summer set out lawn chairs. I took a part-time job sewing hems at Kara's yarn shop because hands like mine have opinions if you stop asking them to help. Ellie ran adult story time on Tuesdays, and I went every other week and sat in the back and kept my mouth shut unless they needed someone to tape a page. She read a bit from Charlotte's Web in June, and half the room cried on the word humble. In July, I saw Luke at the farmer's market across from the peaches. We nodded like you do when you agree not to take up space in each other's aisles. He looked thinner and older. I did not hate him. I was simply done being rearranged by him. You want a twist? There isn't one big one. There are 1,000 small ones. The first time Ellie paid her own utility bill online and the receipt dinged without anyone looking over her shoulder. The day she put her library name badge through the wash and it came out just fine and she laughed about it instead of apologizing to a wall. The moment she took a phone call without stepping into another room to whisper. The night she fell asleep on the couch with the book on her chest and didn't startle when the radiator clinked. The morning she came back from therapy and said, "Mom, I want a dog." And we went to the shelter and came home with a beagle who snores like a lumberjack and answers to Clover like she always has. Peace in our apartment looks like a thermostat at 70 and a bowl for the dog by the door and a sticky note on the fridge that says, "Buy more flour." Because yes, I bake when I'm nervous and we are out of pie crust again. It sounds like a library bag thumping the table and my sewing machine humming and Officer Nguyen's patrol car rolling by like a metronome that doesn't mind being ignored. It tastes like Dottie's soup when the week runs too thin and Mr. Patel's samosas when he's feeling generous and Pam's terrible attempts at lemon bars we eat anyway because loyalty matters more than zest. I have heard people say keeping the peace is holy. I have learned that peace without safety is a hostage situation. I've heard people describe love as tough. I have learned love is warm and ordinary, and yes, tough when it needs to be, the kind of tough that moves your body to the door and your voice to the clerk's counter and your feet to the courthouse and your hands to a set of forms. I know now that sometimes the bravest thing a mother can do is set the temperature herself and sit with her grown child until their shiver is memory and their laugh is habit. If you are listening to this and something in your house has a key you didn't agree to, this is me with flour on my apron saying you don't need permission to be warm. There are nurses who will write it down and judges who will set a line and neighbors who will say sorry and mean it. And there is a diner where the coffee pot never sleeps. There is a version of your life with your name on the lease and your hand on the thermostat. There is the soft click of your own keys in your pocket. That's the sound I bless now. It beats any hymn. I don't know if this is the ending or just the place where the page turns. I know the dog snores and the basil took over the pot and the church bells don't mind being a little late. I know Ellie's laugh lands in the room a whole second before she realizes it belongs to her. I know the first time she said, "Mom, let's go to the lake Saturday. I'll drive."
She didn't check anyone's face to see if it was allowed. And when winter comes again, and it will, I know we'll hang the same crooked paper snowflake she made in 3rd grade, and I'll hear the heater tick on and think, as I always do now, of how heat feels when you don't have to ask for it. I thought warmth was a thermostat setting. Warmth turns out to be a series of choices you make in a world that sometimes prefers your silence. We chose out loud. We keep choosing. And if you are listening from a cold place, I hope this story reaches you like a hand on your shoulder. I hope you set it to 70. I hope you stay.